Isabel Whitefish were boarding school survivors. And even my mother, as a child, as an infant, contracted tuberculosis and was stolen from our family, removed out west, and really raised with unspeakable abuse. So that's a part of my story, my family's story. And I share that with you only to point out that the stories that we tell ourselves daily, and also as we know, as our origin stories, our historical stories, are really important. And so that plays into the work that I do. And I just thank you for having me and humbly sharing my experience. But in the work that I do, I'm a researcher. I work for the University of Chicago as a researcher, and specifically telling the story of indigenous women, Potawatomi women, right? So we know that conquerors write history, and in that narrative, those false narratives, indigenous people and certainly indigenous women are not included. And so people like John Baptiste DuSable, who we know is coming up more recently as the founder of Chicago, is that truth is coming forward. But the fact that his wife was Potawatomi and made a way for him in Chicago, and there's no way that he would have been successful as a founder, right, or acknowledged without her presence, without her connections, her relationships, and her knowledge. And so that's part of the work that I do, and I think that's really important to tell that truth. That's the very first step of what we're talking about today, our relationship with land. Even in Racine, I think you credit Gilbert Knapp as your founder, right? But Antoine Wilmette, or Oymet, was the first French, they thought potentially native settler. And guess what? His wife was Potawatomi. And so it is my work to bring those stories forward. I think that's the first step in doing this. And we know that the relationship that we have with land is tied to how we treat our women. Native people know this, and we see this in the epidemic of the murdered and missing indigenous women. So that's all a part of the work that I do. Specifically, not Line 5 that crosses our Ojibwe brothers reservation and potentially contaminate their water sources. Mashkiki Zibing, Bad River, is critical right now, and I know we have some actions that we need to take, certainly to allow our comments to be heard and our voice to be heard, which I implore you to do. But when I think about the land, I have some comments that I wrote down that I'd like to share with you in our relationship to land, specifically Native people. As I mentioned, the introduction I provided is a traditional introduction, and it really keeps our history and our culture as Native American people. And so in this history, the people of this land are Anishinaabe, and they're original people, and our creation stories tell us that we've always been here. And as the original stewards, we have a sacred responsibility and relationship to the land. And so that's why you see indigenous people on the front lines of all these struggles, right? We take that responsibility very seriously, just like I'm a Potawatomi woman, a Bode Wadami, a firekeeper woman, to keep that fire, Ishkode, the heart of the nation. And so I'd like to share that these traditional teachings that we learn from birth instill humility, gratitude, and reciprocity. And it's with this knowledge that we know we are the last of Creator's beings. So therefore we need all other orders of life in order to survive. And so we have that instilled with us at birth. And we know that this includes clans and foods and medicines and plants and sacred spaces. So this is why we have this relationship with land. Our homeland, Milwaukee, or Manenawak, and the Great Lakes hold a deep connection to Creator. This connection provides lessons for sustaining that sacred relationship and roadmap. So 12 nations call Wisconsin home, along with many other that were forcibly removed. The fact that indigenous people endured and continue to act as stewards is a remarkable act of perseverance. So it is with gratitude and intentionality we honor the relationship indigenous people have with the land, and not just with our words, but in action, what we're doing today. So I thank you for that. Miigwech.